The regular season has come to an end. Dan Mahar is back from assignment, and the Royals are going to play an OHL team next season. Welcome to the OHL podcast. My name is Mike Farwell. You'll find me on X at Farwell_OHL. The guy over there is Dan Mahar. On X at his name, Dan Mahar. Dan, I trust while you were away on assignment, you were figuring out exactly what it was that happened in the final game of the regular season between the Kitchener Rangers and Owen Sound Attack at the Bayshore last Saturday night, right? You know, you can explain this to everybody.
I wish I could, Mike. What I will admit to, because you know how it is, right? You're flipping between games. You're trying to keep an eye on a bunch of different games. Well, I knew Kitchener had let's just call it what it is, a junior B-laden lineup. Owen Sound going for the points, I think, trying to establish a little bit, hold on to that sixth spot in the West. Score was 6-1 in the third for Owen Sound. I flipped to another game, figuring, okay, let's check out another couple games that maybe have a little more relevance. Flip back and it's 6-6, and I was like, what happened? So I admit I missed a whole batch of goals there, but I think they came in about 5 minutes. So no, I don't have an explanation for what happened there.
They came in exactly 7 minutes of hockey time. And you, Dan, have an excuse. You flipped to another game. That's fine. I was there, and it was actually my job to broadcast the game. And I had flipped to other games in my mind. I was in story time mode. Sometimes, you know, you get long delays in a game, or games are blowouts and there's no expectation of a comeback. So you just devolve into telling some stories with your broadcast partner. So we were in full on story mode, and all of a sudden it was 6-2, 6-3. And at 6-4, I even said on the air, I'm like, I better refocus here. It's enough story time. The Rangers might be having, they might have something cooking. And anyway, junior hockey at its finest. The Rangers with a 6-goal third. Even when Owen Sound regained the lead at 7-6 with 3 minutes to go, the Rangers weren't done. It was quite the affair. And I'm going to come back to something you just said a second ago in a minute. But while I was in Owen Sound, how about this beauty? If I can get this up on the camera properly, Jared in Owen Sound gave this to me. If you're not seeing it on our YouTube channel, my apologies for that. But it's a Kitchener Rangers puck circa 1995 or so. It's got that cartoon cowboy logo. Jared sought me out at the Bayshore, said, I promised to give this to you. He had sent us a message through our OHL podcast Instagram page, said he was going to bring it. I don't know about you, Dan, but I think that this Rangers logo and everything with this logo on it should be buried in the desert with the old Atari video game cartridges of that E.T. video game. I cannot stand the cartoon cowboy. I wish the Rangers had never done it.
Yeah, the logo is definitely hokey, but you got to admit there was some fun in that era. There was some really entertaining games. You talk about that game on Saturday night, No One Sound. There was some outstanding memories from that era. So if you can just forget the logo and just remember the players and the teams, it was pretty entertaining.
That's fine. I'll give you that. But oh my gosh, I'm a fan of the classic look. The thing you said a moment ago, flipping between games, my new addiction, Dan, and I will put this out there for anybody that follows this league, and especially if you use the app, because it gives you really easy access, the CHL app, to the home and the away radio broadcast if you want to. So my new obsession is checking in with every market in this league via their radio broadcaster. And on Sunday afternoon this past weekend, when it was Windsor and Sault Ste. Marie for basically all of the marbles, right? The Hounds want to get to fourth in the conference. The Spits want to win another West Division title and get second in the conference. And I'm out walking the dog, and I'm listening to Jerry Liscombe Jr. up in the Sioux call the game. I got into a back and forth on X with a fan from Brantford who talked about preferring the radio call and encouraging Flow Hockey to add it to their options when you stream a game. Apparently, it's one little cable. I know we could connect it to our box in Kitchener, but I just put this out there not as any sign of disrespect to anyone, but the radio guys are kind of embedded with the teams. They travel with them. I think what you get from them in terms of color around the game, content through the intermissions, et cetera, is a little bit richer. And for me, admitted, there's my bias. I'm a radio guy, but I just tuning into a Sault Ste. Marie broadcast while I'm walking the dog in Kitchener on a Sunday afternoon in March, Bring it on. And Jerry calls a great game. Anyway, just a little aside there. I love going back and forth, flipping between these games on that radio app.
Yeah, and it's true of a lot of the markets, isn't it? They have some great crews, and you don't want to offend any of the crews that are doing a good job in this league, but yeah, I think we see it with the NHL. I know I do it with the NHL when you have different options to pick your favorite crew and stick with them. Like, it's not disrespect to the one you're tuning out, but some of them really bring it, and I think you should spoil yourself and check out some of these other markets. Some of the radio crews are just terrific and have been doing it for a long time.
Time to get down to business this week on the OHL podcast. For you, that means please subscribe to this podcast wherever it is you are tuning it in, audio, visual. Hit that subscribe button, give us a like, a review, leave a comment, interact with us anytime. But please hit that subscribe button and also tell a friend about us. One of the big pieces of business, Dan, comes courtesy of Elliot Friedman on Hockey Night in Canada, the weekly headlines this past weekend. And Friedman tells us that negotiations are underway between the National Hockey League, the American Hockey League, and the Canadian Hockey League that would allow 19-year-old players drafted in the first round into the NHL to be inserted into AHL lineups starting as early as next year.
Yeah, and I think we all knew this was coming, right? It's been talked about for so many years, and with the CBA negotiations underway for quite a while now, we've heard various things through the media, all of which were pointing to there's going to be some sort of change to this rule. And you and I always talked about guardrails, right? Well, okay, if it's coming, if we're going to have to accept there's some sort of ability now for NHL teams to place 19-year-olds in the AHL, at least come with guardrails, which there are. Have to be a first-round pick. That's a great guardrail. There was no limit on the number of them, so conceivably a team could have 2 or 3 in there. Like, you look at the Nashville Predators, Brady Martin's down there, Cam Reed's down there. So you have a few different options, right? That could really sting their OHL teams or their CHL teams. But I think this was coming either way. So I think it's something we've all had time to accept that it was going to show up. And now it's just a case of how it impacts the league. Some see it as doomsday, others see it as no big deal, giving another pathway to these players. But I'll be consistent in my message. I just hope and pray that NHL teams and GMs are smart enough not to hinder the development of kids who could still benefit to play huge minutes in the CHL. Make this for the ones where clearly have maybe outgrown the league and just need some physical maturation around pros. But we'll see how it goes, but there's some names on that list that it could impact as early as next year.
And that's where I'm coming from on this, Dan. I'm trying to take a measured approach to it, although I do think this is a pretty serious indication that the Ontario Hockey League, the Canadian Hockey League, has another obstacle to overcome, right? With the NCAA rule change, there's a possible loss of talent of older players going to the NCAA. Now you could lose older talent to the American Hockey League. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. If I'm being honest, I still believe that the Ontario Hockey League is the number one development league in all of this world, but it's certainly not a reputation it can rest on. There's a lot of work to do to maintain what I believe to be that part of the OHL, which is the number one development league in the world. I hope that, because it feels like you're giving the NHL general managers maybe the keys to the candy shop here and let them go in. And so, to your point, I hope they don't get carried away. I agree that, look, just having first rounders given the opportunity to do this is one thing. I don't think the floodgates are going to open next year. It's not like you're going to see 12, 15, 25 guys going, but the fact that the possibility does exist gives me a little bit of pause for the reasons that I mentioned. And to your point, Dan, we've said it many times. A player has never had their development stunted by staying in the CHL/OHL for an extra season. Let them dominate here before you have them go out there at 19 and play against 36-year-old journeymen.
That's exactly right. And we have seen players jump too early and it stunt their career. So that's the part that gives me pause. And and you're right. It's not going to be floodgates open. I think you might see a little bit more of these experimental trials like you did with, you see a kid play, a month or up till Christmas at the HL level and then be returned. So for me, the bottom line is this really puts OHL GMs through the ringer. They're the ones that got to figure out, do we build a team around 19-year-olds? Do we move them? Do we have to try and figure out how to do it with 18-year-olds? Do we hold spots for kids that might be coming back? Do we gamble at the deadline when they might be returned towards the end of January? Like, there's all kinds of dynamics that come in. So I think the biggest victims of this ruling are probably OHL GMs. And let's face it, OHL GMs can do all the planning and strategizing they want and be as smart as and shrewd as they could possibly want. But luck's just going to have to come into it at some point too, right? Which team drafted your kid? What's their philosophy? What do they think of CHL? What do they think of your franchise? What do they think of the development paths? You're at their mercy to a large extent. So yeah, I think for me, of all the angles of this, OHL GMs are the ones that are going to have the heaviest workload to figure out here.
That is a fantastic point, because we all know that when you look at a Memorial Cup championship team or contending team in the OHL, what does it primarily consist of? 19-year-old players, right?
100%.
Yeah. So
they say it's a 19-year-old league in general. You hear that phrase a lot, right?
Okay, the Ontario Hockey League has been abuzz the last week or so with a recent ruling on a suspension to Storm defenseman Quinn Beauchene. What's interesting about this, Dan, is you and I talked a couple of weeks ago on this very podcast about the number of suspensions we had seen coming down and wondered how they compared to years past. And we sort of had a philosophical discussion about the number of suspensions and, the league issuing media releases about them. And there's two sides of that, right? Could you look at this, say, oh my gosh, this is a really dangerous league, look at all the suspensions? Or do you look at it and say, oh, you know what, this league is really making sure that everybody is aware of what the standard is, and here's how they're applying the standard of discipline. Not sure everybody agrees on that standard of discipline when Quinn Beauchene got a 2-game suspension for swinging his stick, let's just say, at London's Ryan Brown. What do you make of the suspension as issued by the league, Dan?
Yeah, it stunned me, to be honest. Like, I saw the Luke Dragusica suspension early in the year, and I thought, good, they're sending a really loud statement. When you do that, it doesn't happen again. Players get the message. Well, like you said, it's happened again, 3 or 4 times in the same season. And every subsequent suspension has been less and less and less. And I heard the OHL explanation on this one. He didn't make contact with the head, or it wasn't quite as fast. But like, what really are we doing here? Is this like a baseball terms? We're doing like bat speed and exit velocity of the player's head that he contacts? Like, I don't know. I think the intention is what we're ruling against here. And when a player has time to think of his actions and still decides with 2 hands to come hard at a player above, and whether it contacted the head or the shoulder, it's a reckless play that could have done damage. So I think you should be punishing the intent. And if you have a 50-gamer and a 2-gamer, is there that big a discrepancy between those 2 plays? Yeah, obviously the first one was maybe a little more violent, a little more vicious, but I don't know what message you're sending other than, okay, maybe this stuff is kind of acceptable now. It's happening a lot, so we're gonna reduce the suspension here. So needless to say, love Quinn Beauchene as a player, have touted him for quite a while. Did not like that ruling. Thought it definitely should have been more.
Yeah, and I'll start where you finished there. This is nothing against Quinn Beauchene as a player or as a person. This is nothing against the people in the league offices that make the decisions, because I know these things are not easy. This is just general commentary saying, hey, I know we disagree with this, Dan and I, and it seems as though many followers of this league and fans of this great game disagree with it as well. I think one of the points that you make here, Dan, is one that really resonates with me, and that is starting with Luke Dragusica, who gets almost 50 games, and then we work our way down to a player who gets only 2. And one of the reasons given in the explanation from the league is that Ryan Brown wasn't seriously injured on the play. Well, I'll remind you that Brady Blasig was the player victimized by Luke Dragusica, and Blasig was back the next game. He may have left that game, but he was back within a game. So was he seriously injured on the play? Yet that warrants a suspension of almost 50 games, ending Dragusica's season. Same when John Banks took one over the back, upper shoulders area from Braden McCallum. McCallum gets 8 games. So This one reminded me of when we're in an arena watching officials do a review and we think to ourselves, the longer this review goes on, the more likely it is to go against the home team, if you will, because the longer it goes on, the more likely it is that they'll find a reason to wave off the goal or whatever the case may be. And in this case, they're looking at it from an overhead angle, which shows, oh, this is only hitting the shoulder, not the head. Oh, look, Beauchene's hands are spaced out, so he's not swinging the stick all that hard. I think you're trying too hard to minimize the suspension in this case. Again, I have nothing against Quinn Beauchene as a player or as a person. The bottom line is, in the heat of the moment, and this is an emotional game, he swung his stick in a reckless fashion. That's all. That's what happened. And I think that has to bring more than a 2-game suspension with it. I think we punished the outcome as opposed to the intent. And I think that's the biggest mistake in this particular case.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you know, you're kind of picking and choosing what criteria you're basing your ruling on, right? And so you said like whether or not there's an injury. Well, you weren't consistent on that one. You talk about whether or not it contacted the head or not. You weren't consistent on that one. So like there's just consistencies here that bother me. And the thing, and my own criteria that I applied to the Quinn Beauchene play is just this. So not that I'm dismissing Braden McCallum. I thought that they got that one right. That's about what it should have been. But that was a player who engaged, you know, was a little bit of anger, obviously, and just lashed out with his stick. What I didn't like about Quinn Beauchene's play is he had a second to stand there. Play was over. Puck was gone. He actually made the decision. I'm taking a hack at this guy's head area, neck area. So it's almost like it wasn't reactionary. It wasn't based on something Ryan Brown had just done. Like there was time for sober second thought there. So I thought that actually made it worse in my mind. But again, what criteria we're applying here? I think you just need to be consistent. That's the issue I had with it. There was no consistency across these rulings. And when it comes to swinging your stick at a player's upper body intentionally, I think that you got to err on the side of harsher penalties.
I couldn't agree more. And it leaves fans wondering, and commentators like us wondering, whether or not there's a tiered system here, depending on who you are and what your perceived value is to your team. I mean, it's just a question that I think is left in the open when we look at things like this. Why does one get less than the other when the outcomes are essentially the same? Something else that was pointed out, and forgive me, I can't remember the social media thread where it was, but I thought this was kind of interesting around the whole idea of a high stick. And it's 2 minutes for high sticking or 4 minutes if you draw blood. The hell's the difference? Like, why is that suddenly the criteria? You were reckless with your stick. You're reckless with the stick. Why isn't every high sticking penalty 4 minutes? Just because you were fortunate enough, like Quinn Beauchene, maybe it did glance off Ryan Brown's shoulder. Okay. But you're fortunate enough not to draw blood. Therefore, your reckless use of the stick is worth only 2 minutes. I find that kind of funny.
Well, yeah. And it seems quite arbitrary and silly. I get like drawing blood. The theory is that maybe that's a little more severe because you drew blood. But a story going back years, I remember a team I was playing on where a player got high sticked, and it just so happened how he went down. This was a player that was prone to nosebleeds, and kind of the violent motion of the play, his nose started bleeding. So the player on the other team got the 4 minutes, and it was kind of silly because it wasn't a stick that caused it, but there was blood. And what I'm driving at is that the blood criteria is little because you can bleed pretty easily, pretty minor injury. Whereas you could have a significant injury, you could lose an eye without bleeding. So I'm with you. To me, it's about intent. How vicious was it? Maybe there's a major or a double minor for some sort of more severe case. But the blood criteria has always been a little silly to me.
The Sarnia Sting missed the playoffs in the Western Conference for the third straight year, but did they ever finish the season making noise? Or at least their new head coach, Matthew Turcotte, did. If you missed it, I will read verbatim the comments that were made by Sting head coach Matthew Turcotte in the Sarnia Observer following a game against the Saginaw Spirit that the Spirit won 8-4. Here we go. Then they call a timeout when they're up by 3 on a 5-on-3 power play. It just kind of shows how much class they have overall behind that bench. The Spirit would go on to score on that power play, and the Spirit went 4 for 8 on the power play that night. Turcotte goes on to say, they basically score on the power play, go after our 16-year-olds. They've got 4 players who are literally the only players on that team that do something. As long as I'm here, should be some fun games against them. Every game, they come after our 16-year-olds. We do have a few, but funny, they went after Layman's, they went after Jaworski, but they didn't go after Caden O'Coin, probably because Caden's the biggest of the 3. They'll probably do that last game of the season since that's all they do. It's always the same thing with this classless group. They go after our 16-year-olds every night. At a certain point, if the refs can't do anything about it, we will have to respond. That's Matthew Turcotte fired up after what he perceived to be a less than classy approach by Saginaw Spirit head coach Chris Lazary and his coaching staff. And oh, wouldn't you know, these comments were delivered before the teams met again to close out their season. Dan Mahar, what say you about the war of words? It's one-sided. I haven't heard any responses from Lazary, but Turcotte got his money's worth and was fined $5,000 by the league.
And you know what? I gotta say it. I love it. I mean, I wish that we had more of this honesty. Now, you don't want coaches go around popping off and saying disparaging things about players and left and right. You got to control that to some degree, so I kind of understand the fine. But what I see is a junior hockey coach sticking up for his guys. He didn't like what was going on physically against some younger players, and he's standing up for his guys. He's calling out the other team for those actions. If nothing else, he's drawing attention to that follow-up game. Maybe a few more eyes on it, saying, okay, well, we're here watching now. So if some of this stuff he accused you of starts to occur, we're actually watching now. So I have no problem with the coach backing his guys, sticking up for him. Sometimes you just got to be a little careful what you say and how you say it. But I don't know, I feel like these things are good for the league. They bring attention to it. How many eyes are on that? How many more tickets do they sell to that follow-up game based on the attention that this got? So I'm not saying you want your league to be a circus and people attending to try and see brawls between these players, but I have no issue with what Turcotte said, and I wish we had a little bit more of that honesty and fewer reins on people saying what they actually felt.
Man, I'm surprised we are so closely aligned on this, Dan, because I am with you for many of the reasons that you just said. In a league, in a game, hockey, that we have often described as being rather boring because we get the same kind of cookie cutter answers from both players and coaches, why not have something a little more colorful here? To the part of the comments around taking a timeout when you're up by 3 goals and you're about to go on a 5-on-3 power play. This is something that's been talked about before, and I remember a former colleague of mine would always say, if you don't want to get embarrassed in a game by 9 goals, or you don't want to have 6 power play goals scored against you in a game, be better. That was his argument. Like, just don't be a bad team. And I was always on the side of, look, there is a limit. We're all out here in this league at a pretty high level, doing the best that we can. Yes, we are measured on wins and losses and power play percentages and penalty kill percentages and all of these other things. But I do think there is a way of respecting one's opponent by not putting out the first power play unit when the game's out of hand, those sorts of things. And I think we see that happen most of the time, which leads me to believe that most people see it my way. But as former colleague, I think it's a fair point. I mean, look, if you don't want that to happen to you, don't be a team that's bad enough to be in those situations. The problem is, of course, you could just be bad on that particular night, and then you're getting, haven't kind of rubbed salt in the wounds for no particular reason, if you will. But I can see both sides of it, which leads me to, obviously some people would say this is not a classy thing to do. Well, if you don't want to be called classless, then don't do things that people will determine to be classless gestures. So I think I'm actually kind of annoyed by the fine, if I'm honest with you. What did he say? If something was done by somebody else that you think is classless, you can't say you think it's classless? Come on, OHL, give the $5,000 back here.
Agreed. I think that's free speech, right? I mean, unless there's something in their code of conduct that runs against it. But yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. And yeah, just on your previous point, like, I'm a card carrying anti-stat patter, so I come down on that side of the equation, and I believe in karma in sports, and sportsmanship follows you. So when you're running your top power play out in a blowout game, I mean, there's nothing against the rules says you can't do that, but I believe there's sportsmanship involved and there's karma will come around. So, I mean, obviously there's circumstances change things. Maybe your power play's been dry for a month and you want to get it reps. Maybe in Saginaw's case, they've got a kid looking for the rookie score, or as a rookie looking for the scoring title. Maybe they're trying to facilitate his draft position. There's different circumstances that play into it, but in general, I believe in what goes around comes around, and I'm one of those, win with class, lose with class guys. And you don't know what's being said on the ice. Maybe stuff's being said, and you want to send a message. But yeah, I feel like when these things happen, coaches should be entitled to say what they want as long as they keep it within certain lines. And like you said, Turcotte I didn't think he said anything that offended young ears, offended sensitive ears. He just spoke truth about what he felt happened in that game, and I don't think that he should be out of pocket.
And you know what? To your point too, Dan, look, Chris Lazary knew exactly what he was doing. He had reasons for doing it. Maybe it was to help Klepov get more points. Maybe it was to keep the power play humming and feel good about himself. Maybe it just was to really get under the skin of the other team. That's okay. He's no dummy. He's not new to this. He knew what he was doing. And I'm sure he knows there likely will be some backlash from it. So be it. These are big boys. They know what's going on out there. It's not against the rules to do that. So when you are doing that, and Chris Lazary isn't the first to do it, he won't be the last to do it, then just go ahead and do it. And then when the other coach sounds off because you did that, fine. The other thing, and you alluded to this earlier, you don't think those Sarnia Sting players are going to know that their new coach has their back when they have a full season with him next season? Turcotte delivered a pretty strong message, I think, to his own players with those comments.
Yeah, and I think everyone that's been involved in sports for any amount of time has been in situations where the other team did something that really got under your skin, really annoyed you, really angered you. And there's ways to address that, right? You can address that internally through how you're going to do it next time you see these guys, or if it's potentially a safety concern, which Turcotte was kind of alluding to, maybe you do go public and hope someone pays attention because you didn't feel that maybe the officials or the league didn't address it. So I don't know. I feel like coaches have to be allowed to speak their mind in these situations, and Saginaw has now every right to address it how they feel. Next time they play Sarnia, or Chris Lazary can say what he needs to say. But I feel that it's just words. They weren't over the top, in my opinion, and there has to be some room for some of that emotion here.
I've been wondering about something, Dan. Do you think that the OHL head office listens to this podcast? Like Commissioner Brian Crawford gathers around the fellow executives, James Boyd, Conrad Hache, the entire communications team, and they sit around the boardroom at the OHL head offices every Tuesday morning for some appointment listening of this podcast. Is that possible, do you think, at all?
If it was happening, probably after this episode, not. They're gonna like those two idiots. They're criticizing our suspensions, criticizing our fines. Like, enough of these guys.
I'm wondering because, and I was being a little cheeky at the beginning of this episode when I said the Royals are playing a team in the OHL next season. Sadly, it's not the Cornwall Royals, although we've talked about the games coming to Cornwall next season. That's different. It's not going to be the Royals' return yet, but the Victoria Royals. More interleague play, Dan, but, and here's why I wonder if the league might be listening, the London Knights are going to travel out to Victoria, British Columbia for a couple of preseason games with the Victoria Royals. I'm here for it. Interleague play, and it doesn't count in the regular season standings. Music to my ears, Dan Mahar.
The fact that it doesn't count is music to yours, I assume, is
Correct.
What you're referring. Yeah,
yes.
So it's not any kind of unfair advantage. And I think I joke with you. Yeah, I think it's great to showcase the leagues this way, and what an opportunity for the Knights players to go out and see that. And I think I joked with you, London, when you're out west, I mean, you'll fall in love with the scenery out there. I think you should just stay because the Western Conference has seen enough of you.
What if the London Knights listen to this every Tuesday morning? Now what?
Oh, I'm just saying, it's really it's a side door compliment for them. I'm saying the reason we want you to stay is because you keep beating all their teams every year. So maybe you'll like it out there. But no, joking aside, yeah, what an opportunity. If I was a kid on that team, I'd be over the moon thinking about that opportunity just to play 2 preseason games. What a great opportunity for those kids.
And I wonder about that connected to what we talked about with 19-year-olds going to the AHL and the changing landscape of junior hockey. I mean, being able to provide experiences like this for your players in the Ontario Hockey League, for some of them, I don't know, Dan, when you got on your first airplane, and I know it's a little different for high level hockey players with tournaments and, whatever they might be involved in, but who knows? That is a whale of an experience for a young hockey player to go out to one of the most beautiful parts, not just in Canada, but in the world, to go to Victoria, British Columbia and play a couple of hockey games. That is a perk, clearly, of being involved with the London Knights next season.
Oh, so cool, isn't it? And think of some of those players in that team will be kids that don't actually go beyond the OHL in their career. Some might only have a cup of coffee in the OHL. So this will be a highlight of their hockey playing days. And then even thinking on the flip side too, the kids from the WHL that get to, oh cool, we get to play the London Knights. We've heard a lot about this team. We just saw them win a Memorial Cup. We get to play them in an exhibition game. Like it's cool all around. You're taking 40 some kids from those two teams and giving them a great experience that they'll never forget. So and get them a little used to that. Pro lifestyle, right? Taking airplanes, doing the travel. So yeah, I see nothing but positives in this.
We know that the regular season has just ended, which means, of course, our playoff predictions are coming up. Dan and I will reluctantly stick our necks out on that while we look back at when we stuck our necks out at the beginning of the season and predicted the finishing positions for each of the OHL teams. We didn't do too bad, but we'll get to that. Our weekly prospects of the week coming up as well. And a look at every market in the league with our weekly wraparound is still to come. So stay with us on the OHL podcast. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, is built for the fastest game on ice. With player props and live betting, every shift, every shot, every save gives you options to get in on the game with DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Dan Mahar was away on assignment last week, so the wraparound was filled in by our good buddy Alan Itmansky. He brought back the traveling hat from Sudbury and wore it during the wraparound. I think it was a nice full circle moment, but we're glad to have Dansky back where he belongs on the wraparound this week, and you get Western Conference duty, my friend, as we go in alphabetical order through the league.
Yeah, and thanks, Alan, for covering for me. Appreciate it. You did a bang-up job. Best wraparound you've had all year, so... I'm just kidding. Yours have been great, Mike. Yours have been great.
First, it's a backhand compliment to the London Knights. Now it's a backhand compliment to Alan Itmansky. The best one he's had all year. It was his only one.
Well, still, it was good.
All right, who do you got? You got to start with Erie for us.
I'll start with Erie. And, I just wanted to do a shout out. So two quick things on Erie. First of all, I had to laugh at, we had the discussion at the start of the year of whether or not Matthew Schaefer might be back because he missed so much time in junior. Yeah, I don't think so. The kid's running away with the Calder trophy race in the NHL. So Erie fans, nice knowing you. He's not coming back. But I just want to give a shout out to Erie fans, those very same Erie fans I just referenced. What a great fan base. This is a fan base that shows up whether Connor McDavid's in their uniform or not, and they support the team no matter what. So a bit of a down year. But I thought a really nice story this weekend with Noah Erliden ending his junior hockey career. They gave him his final home start, and how did he reward them with a 33-save win over Guelph? Looked terrific. I feel like Erliden came to Erie in a bit of a downswing and maybe didn't get all the attention that he otherwise would have, because what a heck of a goaltender he's been for those Erie Otters. And great to... a little nod to that fan base to reward them in his final start there.
Loved my last stop there this year. I love most of them, but lots of passionate podcast fans there. So I guess I'm being biased, but they do love their Otters. They love their junior hockey and hockey in general in that market. And yeah, I'm with you on that for sure. Okay, to Barrie as I start my wraparound in the East, and it's all about Keishon Aitchison, who has established a new mark for Colts points by a defenseman in a single season. Aitchison's 70th point of the season broke the old record of 69 that had stood for almost 30 years since 1997, 1998. Here's something I'm curious about, Dan. When both the Colts and the OHL talked about Aitchison setting the new record, they just said that the record had stood since 1997, 1998. They didn't mention who held it. So I looked it up, of course, and it's none other than the one and only Luch Nasato. And yes, you'll remember now. Is it because when Nasato put up his 69 points, he also had 250 plus PIMs? I don't know. Surely there's not a reason they didn't want to talk about Luch, right?
Luch, one of the nastier players you'll ever have seen play. What an entertainer! But that's interesting. They didn't mention him by name.
I'm looking for a conspiracy theory. That's fine. Aitchison is no choir boy either, as he's suspended to start the playoffs. But nonetheless, Aitchison bests Nasato, and Keishon Aitchison is the record holder in Barrie for most points in one season by a defenseman.
Good job, Keishon. Moving to Flint, Mike. So I think when we came down the stretch and there was shuffling for playoff positions, and Flint and Windsor, of course, have been battling for better part of the last 2 weeks to figure out who's going to be second, who's going to be third, which could come into play in terms of if they play each other in the second round, who gets home ice. Well, Flint had a bit of a no-show for a couple games to kind of cost them that spot. I know Windsor in the last game of the year needed to win Sault Ste. Marie to secure second, but Flint had a bit of a no-show in Kitchener and then dropped one up in Owen Sound as well to kind of let that slip from their grasp. But all is not lost for Flint, obviously. I still think they're a really good dark horse in that conference, and I'll tell you why. Because in the playoffs, depth means a ton. And Flint had a league-high 9 players over 35 points this year. So up and down the lineup, there's depth there. So look out for those Firebirds.
I feel a little bad for them, Dan. With all the records set this year, wins in a season, points in a season, players setting individual marks, they still couldn't capture that West Division title. They've never done it in their franchise history in Flint.
Yeah, and that was kind of my point on this wraparound point, right? That it was there for them. It was so they have, I'm not saying obviously it was a great season, but they have no one to blame but themselves in that final week for not securing that.
Brampton for me now in the East, and it was the final game of the OHL regular season, second game of his OHL career, and Kieran Riley picks up his first OHL point. It was a goal, too, to open the scoring in the Steelheads' season-ending win over Brantford. Riley was a sixth rounder to the Steelheads in 2023. He spent most of this season with the King Rebellion in the OJHL.
Hope you got that puck, Riley. Good job.
You betcha.
Turn to Guelph. A couple interesting things as we head into the playoffs, Mike. So a few weeks back, you'll remember a certain player on the Guelph Storm guaranteed a round 1 victory in the playoffs. Who was that? Grant Spada. We talked about bulletin board material, but I just got to give him a shout out. I looked up and down the Guelph Storm roster. Only 2 players that have been Guelph Storm players for the full season in the plus column. Grant Spada at plus 11 and Noah Jenkin at plus 1. So Spada's been bringing it. Actually put some offense on the board as well. But I also want to give a shout out to Ethan Miedema, who is now third all time in games played in the OHL with 335. And in his final game of the season, got his 100th goal as an OHL player too. So nice milestones for Ethan Miedema.
Well-traveled was Miedema, and good memory by you on Grant Spada's guaranteeing the first round win. Are you trying to give some bulletin board material to Windsor?
To Windsor. It's now Windsor. So yeah, see how they take it.
All right. Brantford is the next stop for me in the East, and it's Seattle Kraken prospect Jake O'Brien, who has set a new standard for Bulldogs scoring. O'Brien picked up a pair of assists in a weekend win over North Bay, giving him 255 points as a Bulldog. That is 2 more than former teammate Patrick Thomas. So Jake O'Brien is your highest scoring Bulldog in franchise history.
Another big milestone there.
It's only a matter of time, quite frankly.
It was, yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving to Kitchener, Mike, and I just want to, as we wrap up the season, I just wanted to point out, I think you and I both agree that Sam O'Reilly changed the entire personality of this team. Just night and day, like a light switch went off. And, credit to Jared Woolley as well, who came over in that deal. But Sam O'Reilly is just something else in terms of the professionalism and how he changed the dynamic around that team. And statistically, it shows up. 43 points in just 28 games with Kitchener, plus 31 as a Ranger in those 28 games. And if you do the math, like if he full season, that's basically plus 75 pace. that which would put him about 25 above the next highest player in the entire OHL. To put in perspective, teammate Jack Pridham is the highest plus minus player in the Western Conference at plus 38. So what a difference he's made. And as the Rangers head into the playoffs too, another interesting side story to watch is, will we see Luke Elleness at any point? I know surgery is supposed to keep him out probably till late April was the initial timeline. We'll see. Already skating. I'm sure he'd love to get back in. Player that could make a big difference if healthy.
My working theory on Sam O'Reilly, Dan, if you'll indulge me, I'd love to get your thoughts on it. But it kind of came to me a week or two after he had gone down to Toronto to see his former teammates play one another in the National Hockey League. The Flyers were in Toronto to take on the Leafs. So Denver Barkey, of course, with the Flyers, Easton Cowan with the Leafs. Obviously, incredibly talented players that O'Reilly played with in London. And so I'm wondering, not to take anything away from the talent that was in Kitchener before O'Reilly got here, but is it maybe possible that all of a sudden this guy is out from under the shadow of other stars? Not that they were keeping him down or anything like that. I'm not trying to be anything negative here, but all of a sudden he's like, listen, guys, follow me. I've been here. I've done this. And I'm going to show you how it's done. I don't know. Just maybe his light is able to shine brighter because there aren't as many high-end bright lights around him.
That is a great theory, because when you watch Sam O'Reilly, and we see this every now and then in the OHL, Mike, don't we? Where you see a player and you say, "There's a pro player in this league, right there." And Sam O'Reilly has that. Like you hear the term, the cliche details, and the details in his game are top notch. But the first thing I notice about Sam O'Reilly is a competitiveness that's just off the charts. It doesn't matter the time of game, what little tiny aspect of the game it was. He cares. He cares about whether the linesman is tossing the other center for an infraction. He cares about, he just cares about every single detail, and those are pro habits.
There's a running joke on Press Row too. I'll just throw it out there for you. If Sam O'Reilly ever smiles, that's how serious this. He's very businesslike, and I'm here for it for sure.
Yeah, pro all day.
Okay, you mentioned Flint before, kind of going in the wrong direction, costing them the West Division title. It didn't win a title, but as I look at the Kingston Frontenacs, boy, did they pick the right time for a season-long 6-game winning streak. They reeled off 6 in a row to overtake Niagara and secure 6th place in the East. Matthew Frost, Landon Wright had a lot to do with that. They combined for 6 goals and 6 assists during the 6-game winning streak, but that was a season-long streak for the Fronts, and it could not have come at a better time getting them into 6th spot.
Yeah, love those runs. Team's good and hot for the playoffs.
Yep.
All right, London, Mike. Just a side note, I didn't actually get a chance to go back and look at all the previous coaches polls, but I thought it was really interesting that in all of the categories in the coaches poll this year, not a single London Knight gained any mention in any of the categories in any of the placings for second or third, and I thought that's really rare for the London Knights. They usually are littered all over that list, right? And then I thought about, where's the injustice? Where's the injustice? I didn't disagree. I mean, maybe you could throw something to Sebastian Gatto at some point in a goaltending category, but really, they were a team that, after the trade deadline in particular, sort of wrote their script for the next year and didn't really have any of those highlight players this year, which is a rarity in London, but I'm sure that will change next year.
Oh, it will. It might even change this playoff. Who knows as we enter the second season. All right, to Niagara for me, and how about Ryerson, Edgar, who put up one of the best rookie seasons in Ice Dogs history. Edgar scored 23 goals. That ties him for second most ever with Chris D'Souza and Marco Insum. The only player with more goals as an Ice Dogs rookie, Ryan Rubrick, who is Edgar's current teammate. Then, and Rubrick, by the way, had 28 to Edgar's 23. Edgar's 47 points as a rookie is third most ever in Ice Dogs history, behind only Akil Thomas and Ryan Rubrick again. So there you go. Pretty good season, though, for Ryerson Edgar. I'm sure we'll be talking about him a lot next year when it's his draft year.
Quite a talent there.
Yeah.
So moving to Owen Sound, Mike, I referenced the coaches poll previously, and I think the one I agreed with the most of anything in that coaches poll was that Harry Nancy is the most improved player in the OHL this year. A lot of candidates for that. We saw a lot of kids take a big step forward, but Harry Nancy took it to another level, and it's interesting to see where he'll go from here. But I also just wanted to shout out, you showed your puck at the start of the podcast from Jared from Owen Sound. I don't think it's the same Jared, but I wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to Jared Langdon, center with the Owen Sound attack. Doesn't get a lot of acclaim, but he's a player who stabilized that center position for the Owen Sound attack and kind of plays with a bit of bite, bit of jam, does his job. And so Jared Langdon, unsung hero in Owen Sound.
How about this from North Bay? He missed 27 games and more than 2 months of action, but Mike McIver returned to the battalion with his first shutout of the season and the 5th of his OHL career. He made 23 saves in North Bay's 7-0 win over Brampton. The battalion were always going to be a tough out in the playoffs, in my opinion. And with the emergence of Jack Lisson this season, North Bay has 2 capable netminders going into the postseason.
Yeah, bit of a goaltending bonanza and controversy, maybe.
Yeah, it could be. I think they're going to go with McIver, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to, yeah.
Yeah.
But Lisson's been great. Saginaw, so you referenced the War of the Words, right? And I wondered about bulletin board material. And I know Sarnia is not playing Saginaw in the playoffs, but when Matthew Turcotte made the reference to only 4 players on that team do anything, I thought, well, I guess we're talking Klepov, Barabanov, Zilkin, and probably Harper, but Harmer, Kluche, there's a whole bunch of players there. Is Shrigan, is he not a little annoyed by that comment? So when sometimes bulletin board material doesn't have to be directly from the team that gave it to you, and we'll see if some of those Spirit take that to heart and really want to show that there's more than 4 of us here that do something. But I also wanted to shout out the obvious. Nikita Klepov, as a rookie, wins the scoring title. And we debated whether or not an OHL player would hit 100 points this year. They did not. He wins it with 97, one of the lower totals ever to win the OHL scoring title. Having said that, as a rookie, he's going to go high in that NHL draft.
Since you brought that up, I made a note of it, and I just wanted to throw it past you randomly. I'll do it here because, yes, Klepov wins the OHL scoring title with 97 points. It's the first time since 1963, Dan, when Wayne Maxner put up fewer than 100 points, that we have not had a 100-point player in this league. That is a wild statistic as far as I'm concerned, 60-plus years. But you know what else we didn't have in the OHL this year for the first time since 2004, 2005? And that is a 50-goal scorer. Yeah. Corey Perry was the last one to not make it, and he scored 47 in 04-05 for the London Knights, just like Merrick Van Acker did for the Brantford Bulldogs this year. We had 3 50-goal scorers in the league last year in Nick Lardis, Michael Misa, and Ilya Protas, but no 50-goal scorers. So no 50 goals, no 100 points. You're the goalie, maybe, or offense just might be down a bit.
Yeah, or maybe priorities too, because Merrick Van Acker probably hits 50 if he plays all the games this year, missed a few, and sat out the final game of the year when he could have hit 50, as did Jack Pridham. It would have been an outside shot for him to get 5 in his final game, but some of these teams said, you know what, we're resting you anyway, so maybe the priorities were a little different.
Could be. All right, I'm off to Oshawa next on the wraparound, and does anyone still remember that ugly 14-game losing streak the Gens had? Oshawa did not win a game from December the 10th through January the 17th. But since then, they have more than doubled their season win total while picking up victories over Ottawa and Peterborough twice. Of the losses, 8 have been by 2 goals or less, including earning a point in an overtime loss to Barrie. So it took the Gens about 40 games in a full-blown rebuild, but I think they started to figure it out. So I think Gens fans have something to look forward to there.
They definitely do. The compete was great down the stretch. So turning to Sarnia, Mike, we talked a lot about them this episode, but there's 2 junior teams in Sarnia, the Junior A Sting, the Junior B GOJHL Legionnaires. Combined played 118 games this year. Combined won 21 games. Not great, right? But the Junior A Sarnia Sting, of those 21, won 21. That's right. The Legionnaires won 0. Why is this relevant to the wraparound? Well, second round Sting pick, Jaworski, came up from the Legionnaires, had put up 21 points in 38 games. Pretty good production for a young kid in that league. One of the bright spots for those Legionnaires, and probably felt like he was going from outhouse to penthouse to go up to the 21-win Sting, and looked pretty good to me in his last few games. So a good piece of the future for the Sting. And also want to mention that goaltender Patrick Quinlan moving on to the NCAA next year. So maybe Kale Osipenko takes the reins. We'll see. But some movement for Sarnia next year.
That Legionnaires offer has made headlines, of course, around hockey. Let's just emphasize, not that I guess I have to, but that's really hard to do, Dan. Go an entire season 0-50. That's crazy.
Uh, Especially when you have a 16-year-old like Sarver Jaworski putting up 21 points for you in just 38 games. I mean, you've got some talent. So yeah, that's unheard of.
Ottawa is the next stop for me on the wraparound, and Ryder Fedorov picked up his 6th shutout of the season in a win over Niagara, giving him the record not just in Ottawa, but in the OHL. No other rookie OHL goalie has ever recorded 6 shutouts in a season. It's the year of Ryder Fedorov.
Year of the Ryder Fedorov and the goalie, as you mentioned.
That's
a great
right.
year for them. So moving up to the Sioux, a team that actually spent a lot of assets on a goalie to bring Carter George in. Actually, quite a pedestrian stretch. So you talk about Flint kind of loosening their grip on second place in the last few games of the year. Well, Sioux the same. They look to have a lock on home ice advantage against the London Knights. Kind of frittered it away down the stretch with some, we'll call it uneven play in the last 10. Just a 500 record, and kind of handed London home ice, especially with the final game on home ice against Windsor, which they dropped. But I think more importantly for Sioux was getting Chase Reed back in the lineup to get 3 games under his belt before the playoffs start, because he'll be a key piece of that if they're going to win against London.
Absolutely. All right, I'm sticking with goaltenders as I look at Peterborough, and netminder Easton Rye has tied the Pete's franchise record for wins in a season with 38. He joins Rick Laferriere, who set the mark more than 40 years ago, putting up 38 wins for the Petes in 1979-1980. Mike Keenan was coaching the Petes that year, and it was the year that they won their 3rd consecutive OHL championship. So congratulations to Easton Rye for writing your name into the Peterborough Petes record book.
Heck of a year for him. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, wrapping up in Windsor, Mike, I want to ease concerns for those Spitfires. You had some big wins down the stretch, and there were some injury concerns. So getting Cole Davis back already, but Spellacy and Villeneuve, word is, should be ready for the playoffs. So that lineup's going to start to look scarier and scarier as that you head into the playoffs. And also want to point out, I referenced plus minus earlier. One of those stats that take it for what it is, but I mentioned Jack Pridham was the top Western Conference player, but only 8th overall in the league, as the top 7 were all in the East. But that top shutdown pairing, we'll call it in Windsor, of Wyatt Kennedy and Andrew Robinson, a combined plus 73. So those Guelph Storm, if you're guaranteeing a win against them, you might want to try and score on the other pairs, because not many get scored on those two.
Stay away from those guys. Got it. And the unintentional theme, I should have paid more attention to the notes I was making and said my wraparound was all about the goalie, because I'm going to finish things off in Sudbury. And we talked about this through the season, Dan. Goaltending was a big part of the Wolves season. They started 6 different goaltenders and allowed the 6th most goals in the OHL this year, for what it's worth. But here's a fun fact for you. Sudbury was also one of 4 teams to not record a shutout this season. So it wasn't too long ago we talked about Guelph getting shut out. They were the last team to go through the season without being shut out. But Sudbury, one of only 4 teams to not post a shutout on the season. You want to take any wild stabs as to any of the other 3, Dan? Did not record a shutout this season. Sudbury and...
Oh, good question. Erie?
Erie is one of them. Saginaw and Sarnia, the other 2. So 4 teams not getting shutouts this season. Sarnia, Saginaw, Erie, and the Sudbury Wolves.
Well, long year for some of those teams.
It was a long year for some of those teams, but the second season's about to begin. And let me see, 2 of those teams, Sudbury and Saginaw, are headed to the playoffs. Dan and I are headed to sticking our heads on the line here. The necks are way out. Predictions are coming. So too, your prospects of the week. Stay with us right here on the OHL podcast. With 68 regular season games in the books, it is time now for the OHL's second season. Dan, as we prepare to predict the outcomes of the 8 first-round series, do you care to look back at how we did from the beginning of this season and the predictions that we made?
All I want to say is I'm sorry, Ottawa 67s fans. That's all I'll say about that.
I'm with you on that. We both had the Ottawa 67s and the Brampton Steelheads missing the playoffs in the East this year. I'll run down what you had, Dan, 1 through 10.
Okay.
Brantford, Niagara, Barrie in third, fourth, North Bay, fifth, Peterborough, sixth, Oshawa, seventh, Sudbury, eighth, Kingston, ninth, Ottawa, and 10th, Brampton. Anything besides your apology to Ottawa you'd like to add?
Yeah, Niger, what are you doing to me? You should be apologizing to me. There's a couple. Kingston, obviously, I wasn't sure where to place you. That got hot down the stretch, so it was a little low on you as well. So, in general, not terrible on a few of those, I think. Right?
I, I felt the same. Like, if I'm being
Yeah.
generous to myself, I'll say I wasn't terrible. I had Brantford in first, followed by Niagara. Why I had Sudbury third, I am really questioning now. Then Peterborough, who did finish fourth. Barrie, I had them too low. Kingston, North Bay, Oshawa was my 8 seed, and then Ottawa, Brampton missing. So I will, with you, Dan, ask Niagara for the apology. What did you do to me here? And I don't know why I had Sudbury as high as I did. I cannot remember that rationale, and I care not to at this point. Okay, Dan, your Western Conference predictions went like this. First place, Windsor, followed by Kitchener, London, Sioux, Owen Sound, Flint, Guelph, Sarnia in eighth, Saginaw, and Erie missing. General thoughts?
Pretty darn close,
Not bad.
actually. I was a little low on Flint, and I was like Kingston in the East. They were one team that I was struggling with, and in both cases, I went lower just because I wasn't sure. So Flint's the one I feel like I missed there, but not bad.
You were a little low on Flint. I was a lot low on Flint. And as you alluded to earlier when we were in the wraparound, I had Matthew Schaefer coming back again, much
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Sudbury. What was I thinking? So I had Flint in 10th and Saginaw at 9th, missing, and Erie as high as 7. I did pretty well, 1 through 4. Kitchener, Windsor, Sioux, London. So I just had London and Sioux. Or I think I blew Flint badly there. Then I had Guelph in 5th, Sarnia 6th, Erie 7, Owen Sound 8. So not terrible, but some of the, like, Ottawa stands out for both of us in the
Yeah.
East. I really blew Flint in the West and Sudbury in the East, but that's what happens when you stick your neck out, Dan. These are the sorts of outcomes you deserve.
They are, but you know what? Let's pat ourselves on the back because as we segue into our playoff predictions, we both had Peterborough and North Bay playing in the first round. So that's not bad.
I like it. I like looking for the positives. So let's get into those playoff predictions because what could possibly go wrong? We'll start in the East, Dan. Brantford, Sudbury is the 1-8. Who you got and in how many games?
I'm going to shock you here, Mike, and I'm going to go with Brantford. And I'm going to actually give a straight sweep.
Yeah.
No disrespect to Sudbury. I just think that, yeah, there's just too much firepower on that Brantford side. It's going to be a steamroll in round one.
Sweeps are hard, but I'm with you 100%. I do think Brantford will win in 4 straight. Okay, Barrie, Niagara. Who you got and in how many?
I've got Barrie. I think they're a powerhouse not far behind Brantford. But I'm giving Niagara at least a game here. I'm going to go with Barrie in 5. I think Niagara is quite capable when they find their gear, and I think they're going to steal at least one. So Barrie in 5 for me.
I agree with the capability of Niagara, and they've got some game breakers here.
Yeah.
Rubrick's going to be back, we're hearing, right?
Yeah.
And as good as the Barrie Colts are and have been, and quite frankly, they scare me a ton in the Eastern Conference. I'm giving the Colts 2, or I mean, in the Ice Dogs 2 in this one. So I'm going Colts in 6 in this one for what it's worth.
Okay.
Okay, the 3-6 is Ottawa Kingston in the East. Who you got and in how many?
This was the toughest one for me in the East, Mike. Because so much of it's going to come down to what Ryder Fedorov does in the playoffs. But I still think Ottawa surprised everyone for a reason. They're very deep. I know Kingston's hot, but I'm giving it to Ottawa in 6.
We're opposite what we just did. I went Colts in 6. You went Colts in 5. I'm going to go 67s in 5. I think your question is a fair one. What does Ryder Fedorov do in the playoffs? But he has given me no reason to not believe in him. So I've got the Ottawa 67s in 5. Kingston just doesn't have the firepower against that stingy 67s defense. And finally, the delicious 4-5 in the East. I think this is a dandy matchup, Dan. Peterborough gains home ice, North Bay. Who you got? And in how many?
I think this is going to be a real good series, and I think a lot of it will be that home ice advantage that Peterborough hung on to, and I really love, obviously, that they added at the deadline. I'm giving it to Peterborough in 6.
Pete's in 6. This is the rematch of the 2023 Eastern Conference Final that the Pete's won in 7, and they were down 3-2. They had to go to North Bay and survive, winning Game 6 there and then going home to win Game 7. I've got the
Yeah.
Pete's in 6 this time too. I like North Bay a lot. I probably would have taken them if they could have got, because they're good on home ice, like so many teams in the league are. But I think Peterborough, I like the additions they made. I think they're a pretty well-rounded team, and I'm going to give them the nod in 6. I should have pointed out Ottawa Kingston. It's the first time these two teams have met in the playoffs since 1981. Can you believe that?
Go figure, eh?
That's a wild one.
Yeah, it is.
So we are in lockstep here, with the only differences being in the number of games, but we've both got the Bulldogs, the Colts, the 67s, and the Petes in the East. So essentially we're riding the favorites. Let's go into the West. The 1-8 matchup, Dan, is Kitchener and Saginaw. Who you got?
I think the Rangers definitely too good, too deep. Had a pretty easy time with Saginaw in the regular season. All of this points to a sweep for me, so I'm going to go Kitchener in 5. I know, I tricked you. I think Saginaw's got so much firepower, and I can see if power plays become an issue in one of the games. I think Saginaw's got enough skill to steal a game, but Kitchener in 5.
That is exactly what I think, for those same reasons. You talked about it in the wraparound, right? What do you mean only 4 guys on that team that literally do everything, right? They have enough firepower. They might squeak out a game here. This is as good a Kitchener team as I have seen since the '08 team. And I don't just say that because I'm biased. It really is. I've seen every team since then. It's a very well-rounded Kitchener team, but the Spirit might be able to steal one. So I'll take Kit in 5. Okay. The 2-7 is Windsor taking on the Guelph Storm. What do you think, Dansky?
This one's tough because I don't want to disrespect Grant Spada's prognostication abilities, but I think Windsor is just so good. They didn't play to their capability all year. I think they have another gear, especially if they're healthy. I've got Windsor in 5 in this one.
It's funny. I had forgotten about Grant Spada's prognostication until you reminded me of it. But this Storm team has been so inconsistent, and Windsor seems to be finding itself. I thought it was a gutsy win with a shorthanded lineup on the road to capture the West Division, to get the 2nd seed. Sweeps are hard, but I'm picking the Spits in 4. I really am. Yep.
Yeah, could be.
Okay. Flint, Owen Sound, the 3-6. Firebirds, of course, the 3. Who you got?
Yeah, well, if I was wavering at all, watching Owen Sound relinquish 6 third-period goals to the Junior B Rangers the other night kind of stifled any. So I think, yeah, Flint, again, so good. I do think it's tough playing in that Owen Sound building from time to time, and if they get hot. So same measure of respect as the first 2 teams, I'm giving it to Flint in 5.
I am also giving it to Flint in 5, and I'm doing so because I want Owen Sound to win its first playoff game since 2023. Okay, because they have been swept the last 3 years, and you look back, 9 of the past 12 playoff appearances for Owen Sound have ended in the first round. So I think it's going to be 10 of 13. They've got some work to do up there at the Bayshore, but that's for the off season. And I think the off season is coming after a 5-game first round exit at the hands of Flint. And now probably the best matchup that this first round has to offer, Dan, in either side. And that's the number 4 seed London Knights taking on the number 5 Sioux Greyhounds. Who you got and in how many?
So I would like to thank the Sioux Greyhounds for dropping their final home game to Windsor, so that technically I can pick an underdog in the playoffs, because I've got Sioux in 6 in this one. I think that it's hard picking against the Knights, because you know what they do when they need to do it. I just think there's too much talent on that Sioux side. I think obviously with a couple of these players getting healthy, getting some reps down the stretch, they haven't been sharp, as I mentioned, the wraparound down the stretch, but I think they just, on the weight of skill and how difficult it can be to go up to Sioux and play, I think Sioux's going to overwhelm a depleted London roster in the playoffs. So Sioux in 6.
How do you pick against the back-to-back champs that somehow, some way, Dan, found a way to not just make the playoffs comfortably, but have home ice in the first round? Like, this is This is what we call a rebuild in London. Come on with your coming on here. Really impressive. Although I'm with you and in the same number of games. I do think that the Sioux just has more of that high-end talent. They stumbled down the stretch, but I think they'll figure it out in the week leading into the playoffs, and whether they're starting on the road or not. I think they've got more than enough on this Sioux team to win this series. And one of the other reasons about that, London is so good at playing tight games, more times to extra time than any other team in the OHL this year. But I think that's something that comes back to haunt them in the playoffs, because they don't have those game breakers. And then those shootout games end up going to losses in overtime or regulation play, whatever the case may be. So I'm going to take the Sioux in 6, but it's going to be a low scoring affair. And the wild card is Carter George has never loved playing the London Knights. So I know that was the prized acquisition for the Sioux. I'm sure they were wishing they didn't have to play against London.
Yeah, although it was lining up that way for over a month. And you know, you and I, our predictions were all like very similar. So all that means is congratulations, Kingston, North Bay, Saginaw, and Guelph on your first round victories.
You've never been more right, Dan Mahar. You have never been more right. Okay, one more piece of business for us as always, and that is our weekly prospect of the week. This is the NHL draft eligible player that caught the most of our attention. Dan, who you got?
Okay, I just want to preface this. I wanted to use the final prospect of the week to recognize players whose seasons are done. Brampton, they're done. Couldn't find anyone there. Brooks Rogowski was my guy recently. Sarnia, I love Manza, love Beckham Edwards. But for this week, Mike, I settled on Michael Deck of the Erie Otters. People forget he's a draft-eligible player because he's a 2007 born guy. But how about the season he had, ending with a 4-point game to get to 68 on the year, almost double his next highest teammate. Just brought it all year, loved his game. Not the biggest guy, so hasn't been on a lot of draft radars, but I mean, he just brought it every game, was a dangerous forward regardless of who he played with. So season over for the Erie Otters. Wanted to use the last prospect of the week for an Erie Otter, so Michael Deck's my guy.
You think Owen Sound kind of misses him a little bit?
I think maybe. He didn't do as well when he left.
Another guy who was traded is on my radar for prospect of the week. He finished the season on a 3-game point streak, and he had 6 points in 6 games for a Wolves team that dropped 4 or 5 down the stretch. I'm looking at J.C. Lemieux, who, of course, was acquired from the Windsor Spitfires, and perhaps alongside Dylan Edwards, acquired by Kitchener, one of the sneakiest, best deadline pickups in the league this year. It was Lemieux who put up more than a point per game in Sudbury after averaging only about a half point per game in Windsor. I know not just change of scenery, but different opportunity, et cetera. But I like J.C. Lemieux's game coming down the stretch, and he is my prospect of the week. Since I mentioned the name, I hope Dylan Edwards finds himself a free agent opportunity somewhere. What he has done since coming to the Kitchener Rangers has been pretty special. And the only reason I didn't take Ryder Cali this week is because I just picked him like 3 weeks ago, but come on, 7-game heater into the playoffs, and he's going to be one of the reasons that North Bay is a tough out. So I'm throwing in all kinds of honorable mentions.
But I'm glad you did.
Yeah,
I'm glad you did with Ryder Cali, because he actually gave me pause in predicting that series, because he has been so good. And every playoffs, do we not see a guy that just leaps off the page in playoff hockey, and it could be him this year.
Absolutely. Okay, that'll do it for another episode. This is the end of the regular season episodes of the OHL podcast, but Dan and I will be with you right through the playoffs and to the Memorial Cup as well. Remember, we love the interaction, so please find Dan on X at his name, Dan Mahar. I'm on X at Farwell_OHL. Email us anytime, ohlpodcast@rogers.com. You'll find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. It's the OHL Podcast, your premier source for OHL information. We'll be back with another episode next Tuesday morning.